And so I want to give you a primer on unwritten rules. They are the most important thing you never, ever think about. And they are the key to solving every big problem we can't solve. From hunger to homelessness, to our political divide, to climate change, to expanding well-being, which is what we're doing here today. So here's the story. I want you to understand why they work and how they work. Why they work. The best thing I've ever read on why unwritten rules work came from noted 20th and 21st century thinker, the great Frank Zappa. Okay? Now, for those of you in the room who are too young to know who Frank Zappa was, he was a brilliant and visionary musician who was profoundly weird. Would anybody here like to remind the others of his children's names? Dweezil and Moon Unit. Thank you. Moon Unit, obviously a girl's name. So Frank Zappa said this: life is like high school with money. I hate that sentence, and I hate it because it's true. Okay? Unwritten rules are powered by something called social normative influence. Social normative influence is a kind of social pressure that we exert all day on the people around us to get them to behave the way we want them to. And we all comply with social normative influence because we want to be liked and accepted. Not because we're weak, but because we're social creatures, and that's how social creatures roll. In fact, the very idea of pushing back against social normative influence, against resisting an unwritten rule, fires up our amygdala, the part of our brain that processes fear and stress, and we are miserable. Okay? Now, written rules are reinforced by HR departments and cops and the court system. And unwritten rules are reinforced simply with social cues, with these subtle signals that we send each other all day to register our approval or disapproval of each other's behavior, right? Now, I'll give you an example of social cues using an unwritten rule that you are familiar with. You're on the 5th floor of an office building and you want to go down to the lobby, so you walk over to the bank of elevators and you press the down button and you wait. And after a minute, the elevator arrives, the doors open, and inside are a handful of other people. You step in, you press L for lobby, and you face the doors. Except today you don't. Today you're feeling a little cheeky, so you spin around and you maintain eye contact with everyone else on the elevator. You can smile, you don't have to be a jerk, but you maintain eye contact all the way from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to the lobby. And that makes us miserable. And I have it on very good authority that the imaginary people on the elevator wanted to kill you. And that's because you violated an unwritten rule about how we're all supposed to behave on an elevator. It is not written anywhere. It is followed everywhere. But in the name of science, I spun around and faced everybody else on the elevator to note their reactions. And they rolled their eyes, looked down, looked away, crossed their arms, pursed their lips, snorted, sighed deeply, mumbled under their breath, shifted their weight, and backed away, all in an effort to get me to turn around. But these are not idle party tricks. This is not just a cute aberration of human behavior. They're really important. And the first reason they're important is because they keep our groups stable and predictable. Every morning when you wake up, you know how the other people in the house expect you to behave. And on your way to work, on the highway or in public transportation, you know how other people expect you to behave. And in the office, you know how other people expect you to behave. And the same is true at a restaurant or a bar after work. Without them, we would be miserable. We would be lost. It would be chaos. But there's a downside to all this stability and predictability, and that is that unwritten rules make our groups highly resistant to change. Groups don't change because of unwritten rules. Here's why. I told you that unwritten rules are powered by something called social normative influence. The word norm in social normative influence is the root of the word normal, right? So unwritten rules literally tell us how to be normal. And then people around us all day send us signals to reinforce that position. And then when we, us geniuses, invent new things and stand in front of people and tell them to change, what they hear is not that we're asking them to be different, but that we're asking them to be abnormal. And that is making them crazy. So the third thing I want you to know before we work together later, and that is that unwritten rules are more important than written rules. You're on the expressway and the speed limit, the sign says 55 miles an hour. This is a very clear written rule. But if the person to your left and the person in front of you and the person behind you are all going 70, you're going to go 70. And if a new person joins the flow of traffic, the four of you have agreed that that person ought to go 70 as well. I'll give you another example. We talk about this idea of gender pay equity, right? This idea that women should be paid the same as men for the same work. It came up a lot this summer with the women's national soccer team. Did you know there's a federal law that mandates that women be paid the same as men? It was passed in 1963. This is the signing ceremony. Before I move on, I'd like you to enjoy something about this picture. It represents the breadth of American society from Anglo all the way to Saxon. Anglo to Saxon. But here is my point. That law is 56 years old, and women make 80 cents on the dollar. 56 years old. Written rules do not change human behavior. Lest you get discouraged, the latest research says that our current rate of progress, women will be paid the same as men in 2119. So it's just 100 years. If you just hold on, ladies, patience. Now, I want to explain to you why unwritten rules are more important than written rules. And the answer is just evolutionary. Unwritten rules have been around about 200,000 years. Ever since Homo sapiens began wandering the earth, we didn't have language. We hadn't invented written language, obviously. So the only way we could keep each other in line are with, dirty looks. Written rules have been around 5,000 years. They show up in 3000 BC in the ancient Egyptians from the first civilization, and with it the first written rules. So unwritten rules have a 195,000-year evolutionary advantage. Our brains are wired to process unwritten rules. Quite simply, unwritten rules are in our way of making the changes that we want to make.